ladder, they get to work like that. Off-site construction is extremely powerful, very productive. I had a friend tell me once, I have this conversation a lot with these people, I had a friend tell me once that building a house on site is as foolish as building a car in your driveway. Who would do that? Anyway, so when it's all formed up, that weight is lifted by a crane, put on a truck, the truck brings it to the job site, another crane lowers 13 panels and 30 tons of concrete into the pit in one day with no more manual labor than one guy telling the operator to put it down and another guy welding a bead sealant on the corners. Manual labor to mental labor. And that was a small house. We moved other houses. We moved this one, Cambridge, Massachusetts, just outside of Harvard Yard, right? That house is more like the houses that we work on. Built 140 years ago. How much does that thing weigh? My voice cracks when I think about it. 200 tons, 400,000 pounds. And I can guarantee back in 1895, when that house was built, everything was moved by hand. It's actually pretty cool. It's so big, because we were moving it down Mass Ave, we had to cut the tree limbs, make way for it. The trolley runs down Mass Ave, so the catenary wires had to come down. We took those down. And the lampposts that we picked up turned 90 degrees so we could truck this thing down the street. Got us a big crowd. But the reason I bring it up is because this is more typical of what's going on in the job sites. 200 tons, 150 tons, huge things like that. Now don't mistake me. I am not criticizing the guys and gals who built these houses back in 1920 or 1885 or whatever for doing it by hand. They meant to do that. When they brought stuff to the job site, they were little pieces piled up. They meant to do that. Because back then, they were building it by hand. Block by block, brick by brick. Who here, has anyone seen a brick made? I mean, I know you guys probably don't use them. Have you seen one made? I've seen one made. Yeah, we showed it on a TV show. So you take all the ingredients, the clay, all the different things, you put it in a little mold, you fire it, you take it out, you let it set up, you pull it out of the mold, and you have a brick. And because you can put it in a mold, it can be any size you want. But 99% of the brick out there is made to fit in your hand. Because that's how we used to build. By hand, one brick at a time. Try to get that through TSA. They stopped me, of course. I don't look very threatening. Kind of a boy child. They stopped me, they pulled it out. I thought they were going to like swipe it with that fake little thing that they do, and they put it in the fake machine, you know. And they didn't. They just picked it up, and the guy looked at me, he looked at this, and he goes, "Is that a brick?" I said, "That's a brick." You're good. This reminds me of a story, I love the story, the old man in Mason. So an old man is walking down the dirt road, and after a while he comes across a guy, he's down on his hands and knees, brick mortar, working away. And he looks down and he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the Mason looks up and he says, "I'm laying brick." I can hear it too. He says, "Oh, okay." So he keeps walking down the road, goes for another hour, so he comes across a big job site. And there's another guy down on his hands and knees, brick mortar. And he looks down and he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the guy looks up with a smile and he says, "I'm building a cathedral." I don't mind built by hand. We built our cathedrals by hand, our castles, our big houses, our small houses by hand. But that was then. This is now. So what's the equivalent, I started thinking, of the precast concrete panels in your world? I wasn't sure. I don't really know. But then I remembered one day at my house, this thing showed up. Now you're probably familiar with the spider loop, but I wasn't. I had these trees that had to come down, big tall pines, way in the backyard, behind the house. This thing rolls up, doesn't tear up my lawn, 36 inches wide, you fit through a garden gate, puts it out, goes down anywhere you want, goes up, I think 90 feet, my guy was telling me. And he gets the climber up into the tree. The spider lift. Remarkable. So I called up Iron Tree, my local tree company, John Stronzi, Eric Gross, they run it, buddies of mine. And I said, "Guys, what did that $100,000. Now, they bought it years ago. They actually bought it here. John Mastronzi's dad, Lee, has been coming on this thing for 30 years. Eric bought it here, out in the eye. Got this thing, $100,000. The guy gave him a $5,000 discount because he was paying to green, and John never told him that his company's called the Green. Just saying. Anyway, so I asked Eric, I said, how do you justify that investment? And he didn't pause a second. He goes, piece of cake. One of my guys, a climber, can do as much in a day with that as 2 or 3 guys can do in 2 or 3 days or more. That's your productivity right there. But that wasn't the most important thing he told me. Because that thing sits idle sometimes. He said the most important thing is with that spider lift, my guy can work longer. And he wasn't talking about a longer day. He was talking about a longer career. Because he's not breaking his body. He's not body thrusting up a rope anymore. He's going up in a lift. And so he knows the expertise that it takes to get a tree down, which is fun for a while, but maybe not year 15 or year 20. With that technology, he can have the expertise to keep working longer, to stay in this business, and we're losing them quickly. So anyway, I think about that. I don't know what's out in that yard for you guys, but I suspect there's a lot of opportunity out there. I've had a lot of mentors in my career, Tommy, Norm, Richard Roger, those guys, obviously my father, but I got another mentor that I want to introduce you to. His name is Ted Benson. Ted Benson, in my opinion, is the foremost timber framer in the country. Timber framer, right? Post and beam, beautiful buildings like this. This is the way that our homes were built. Our buildings were built for thousands of years, either masonry or with giant timbers. And Ted really wanted to be a timber framer as a young man. But Ted realized he needed to do 2 things. First, he had to teach himself to be a timber framer. But second, he had to save this industry from going extinct. Timber framing was dying out. Because guess what? Timbers are heavy. It takes a village to raise a barn's bent. And now we have the 2x4 made by sawmills. And one guy and his dad can pick up a 2x4 and stick build a house. Just the 2 of them if you want it. So this was going away. So Ted said, I gotta teach myself, I gotta save this industry. He and his brother started out back in the early 70s as a young man, and they started walking the farms in New Hampshire, where he's from. Every farm's got 8 or 9 outbuildings, and he'd knock on the door and he'd ask the farmer, hey, can I take down your old barn for free, the one that's fallen into the ground? And the farmer said, absolutely, because they're cheap mofos from New England. So Ted would take it down. But what he was doing was he was taking it apart to teach him how to put it back together. He was teaching himself to be a timber framer. And he was saving the frames because normally it was the skin that was rotting, the sheathing, the roofing, and stuff like that. The frames were pretty good. And by doing that, he taught himself how to become a timber framer. And in the process, 7 or 8 years after he did that, he literally wrote the book on timber framing. You can still get it today, you can read this book, and you can understand how to timber frame from it. It's sort of the Bible. The other thing that he did, which was very smart, was that he knew he needed a mentor. So the young guy from New Hampshire had a Japanese master temple maker come and live with him to mentor him and his crew. If you've ever seen a Japanese temple, they are the highest art form of timber framing. So he had a mentor come to teach his guys and to teach him. Did it work? It did. Ted co-founded the National Timber Framers Guild, which now has chapters all over the country and all over the world. He built himself a company to build beautiful timber frame homes, which now has 140 people. Not 20, not 140. And, in my opinion, single-handedly revived the timber framing industry, which is still niche, but now it exists. And he built thousands of beautiful timber frame homes, like this one right here. Looks like that on the outside, looks like this on the inside. And the customer in this case was us, this old house. I'll never forget the day when we had the ceremonial bough raising. So you take an evergreen bough, you put it up on the ridge, that's me and Ted up there and the crew. But what's the lesson here? Why do I bring it up? How did Ted build that company? How did he build himself the right to build thousands of beautiful homes like this. What was his secret sauce? That's a 100,000 square foot inline production facility where the floors moved to the carpenters, CNC machines, robots. And when I saw this, he's got a couple of these, he's stored them. And when I saw this, I turned to Ted, who I've known forever, and I said, Ted, this is heresy. You set out to save the timber framing industry, to keep those carpenters who shaped mortise and tenon with chisel and mallet by hand, and you did this to them? And he looked at me, and he said, Kevin, building a house on a job site is as ridiculous as building a car in your driveway. That was Ted who told me that. And he also said, no timber framer worth his salt wants to spend all of his time hogging out mortises, shaping tenons, maybe for a little while, but not all day. No timber framer worth his salt wants to lift the heavy vents and the panels. Let the cranes do that, so that the carpenters can do what they're skilled at, so that the climber and the sawyer doesn't have to worry about up and down, but worried about getting things down safely. And make no mistake, when his guys are on the job site or on the factory floor, they are carpenters. They are wearing their bags. Ted literally had to break his business in order to save it. So what about you all? What about us? What can we do? I think the list is long, but top on the list for me is an idea that I think if we collectively embrace this, I think it can do wonders for our industry, and I think it can supercharge our companies, and I think emotionally it can satisfy us at a level, well, I've seen it, so at a level that I believe is very impactful. And that thing is apprenticeship. I'm not saying we should throw out everything the old timers did. I'm not saying that. A lot of it, yeah, let's progress, but not everything. And this is something that the old timers did really well. Apprenticeship goes back to antiquity, and it has an amazing legacy here in our country. Thomas Jefferson built the foremost home in this country, Monticello, known for his inventions and architects. Thomas Jefferson was an apprentice to be a lawyer with John Adams. Ben Franklin, an apprentice to be a printer. Paul Revere, an apprentice to be a silversmith. George Washington, an apprentice to be a land surveyor. You could argue that our country was built on a culture of apprenticeship. Now, I'm not talking internship. I'm not talking free labor. I'm talking about the harder job of apprenticeship. You hire somebody who doesn't know much, you pay them to work, and you teach them while you pay them. It's a different thing. And I get it. You might be skeptical. You might be thinking, well, like you said, we're small companies. How can I afford to hire somebody who knows nothing and teach them while I'm paying them? And what happens if they get up and walk away when they've learned all they need to learn? And I get that. The process of apprenticeship has a lot to do with getting up and walking away. That word comes from the Latin something or other. It means to learn. When you are an apprentice, you are working for a master craftsman. You are working for a mentor. And you don't know anything, and you are learning a lot. And when you learned enough, what's the next level up? A journeyman. And that word comes from the fact that when you learn enough skill, you can get up, take a journey with your new knowledge and your tools, and go work somewhere else. So yeah, apprenticeship often has a lot to do with becoming a journeyman and going elsewhere. And so you may be thinking, oh my God, the risk that I'm going to spend all this time, effort, money to train somebody to walk away, what? Or maybe even become my competitor? I get it. But I would argue that the rewards greatly outweigh the risks. After all, what is it that we're doing with these companies? Really? I mean, day to day, when we're building these companies. We laying brick, or are you building cathedrals? Now, if you're still skeptical, let me tell you a story about apprenticeship that I hope will hit home. And the main character in this story is someone who you may know. Before I do that, I gotta tell you this. I tell you that the country has this great foundation of apprenticeship. I also will tell you that I think we turned our backs on it. I think culturally, we took something that we valued, pushed it to the side, and started valuing other things. And one of them, as you can see from this, is higher education. That 4-year college degree that seems to be pushed on everybody. We've heard this debate, we all know this tension. Just to put this in perspective, this country, the country itself, systematically supports that 4-year degree to the tune of $500 billion a year. Research grants, tuition loans, forgiveness, all of that stuff. $500 billion a year. If you compare that to apprenticeship, $400 million a year. That's a 1,000-to-1 ratio. Every dollar we spend to support apprenticeship, we spend $1,000 to support higher education. Is anyone surprised that they're having trouble finding young people who've got skills and want to get into our profession? You get out what you put in. So, my story of apprenticeship, and I'm hoping will bring you over to my side on this one, to let you know how impactful it is. As I said, the main character in this one is somebody that I think you know. It's Roger Cook, a landscape contractor on our show, been associated with us for over 40 years. And I tell you, I love this guy. Unfortunately, loved this guy is in the past tense. Sadly, Roger passed away a month ago. He got a degenerative disease about 7 years ago, and he fought that for a while, and he lost the battle. But on our show, Roger, I love the guy, we became dear friends, and I can tell you, he's a giant of a man. He's a gentle giant. He's the nicest guy out there. He inspired thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in your industry. When we posted the notification of his passing, the comments went on forever. And I can't tell you how many people said, I got into this business because of this guy. Or people who said, I always wanted to do that, but this is what I do in my backyard because of this guy. Anyway, that's why he's great. But here's the real reason why he was great. He believed in apprenticeship through and through. He did it for us on the show. We brought young people on. We showed them. He worked with them on camera, but he also believed in it off camera. He did it with his own company. He's got 2 key guys, Fred and Tom. It's Fred on the left, Tom on the right. I'll tell you their story. I'll tell you Fred's story. Fred lived in a neighborhood with Roger. And when Fred was a little kid, 14 years old, was in high school. In high school, 14? Yeah, maybe. Anyway, he asked Roger for a job. He said, can I work with you? And of course, Roger said, you can, but I'm going to work you hard. You're going to have to learn some stuff, and you can't be late. If you're not in front of your house at 10:07 every morning, I'm not waiting. I'm driving by. So Fred got up, sat out in front of his house. Roger would pick him up every morning, put him in the pickup truck, drive him to work. Hey, Fred bought the coffee, but so be it. He did that, and he taught Fred everything he knew. Sent him to school, paid for school to get him certified. Same thing with Tom. Joined the company when he was 18, taught him everything he knew. They both left the company at some point. They did. They both left. That's the risk. They both came back. What did Roger get for his effort? He got his 2 best employees. He got to grow the company. Because pretty soon these 2 guys were mentoring younger people and running those crews. He created them, they created the company that Roger had. The other thing he got was an exit strategy. When Roger decided he had to sell the company, he had 2 guys who knew everything about the business and understood the value of it. Because they were in on the books and everything. And they bought the company from Roger. And he got something that was unexpected. In those final years, it was Fred showing up at Roger's house to pick him up and drive him to work when Roger no longer could. I will never forget the last time I saw Roger, 2 weeks before he passed away. He was in hospice at home. And I went to visit him, Clearly to say goodbye. Not much you can do at that point with him, other than just sit by his bedside and to hold his hand. And as I was going in for that final visit, who was walking out? These two. The apprentices were now sitting by the bedside of the mentor, looking after him at the end. Apprenticeship is mentorship, and it is not a one-way street. You get out what you put in. I'll add one thing. I will add one thing for this crowd, because I think this is a crowd to hear it. I think this is a crowd that can embrace this and run with it possibly. So just give me one more second to say this. Right now, there is a bit of a crisis with young men in this country. I don't know if you've seen it, if you've experienced it firsthand, but young men as a group are struggling. They are less likely to enroll, more likely to drop out. They are less likely as a group to find and keep work, more likely to be addicted, incarcerated, and self-harm. It's a problem. At the same time, we have a huge hole in mentorship. And for better or for worse, in male mentorship. If you look at the number of men who are teaching in primary and secondary education right now, the number has gone off the cliff and as low as it has ever been. So in our schools, fewer male teachers, fewer mentors, fewer coaches, fewer homes where a young man grows up with a father in the house. Now, I don't know if the two are correlated, but I feel like they must be. I had mentors all throughout my life. The guys I worked with, I told you about my dad, who brought me to his construction site, and still is there with me. And as sad as that reality is, with the struggles that are going on right now, ironically, it's potentially an opportunity for us as an industry. Those young men are looking for purpose, a place, tribe, if you will, skills, and our companies can provide that. We can give them that purpose and those skills. We can be the mentors that they do not have. And I think that can be a gigantic solution for the problems that we suffer in our industry, and also potentially be the secret sauce for your guys' companies. So let me leave you with this. 3 things to take away. What physical labor on your job can you turn into mental labor? Make the job better. What of your businesses can you break to make them stronger, to save them? And finally, it doesn't matter where you are in that organization. Do you own it? Do you run it? Do you have a crew? Are you on the crew? Are you just getting started? It is a mind shift. No matter who you are, when you're out there working, be a mentor, not a boss. And so, that expression that I started with, let's not build them like we used to. Let's build them like we were meant to. I appreciate you guys' attendance. I really hope that you have a great show this week. I thank you very much for being here.
See you guys.
Thanks so much, Kevin. That was great. Maybe one more round of applause for Kevin O'Connor, if you would. Maybe we can convince him to come up for a few questions, if you would. I'm sure there's a lot of curious folks in this audience, and we'll have some folks with mics in the audience here if you want to come up and ask a question. We got Brandon over here, I see him. But Kevin, first of all, I'm glad to know what you were going to do with this brick.
This stays behind.